They called him Babyface, a 19-year-old replacement pilot fresh from stateside training, sent to the most brutal fighter group in the 8th Air Force. He landed at Dibon on a cold March morning in 1944. His logbook thin, his combat experience non-existent. The squadron commander looked him over and shook his head. The mechanics laughed. Within 6 hours, he would be alone above Germany, surrounded by 9 F-190s, with no wingmen and no way out. March 1944. The air war over Europe had become an industrial slaughterhouse. Every day, hundreds of American bombers crossed into German airspace. And every day, the Luftwaffe rose to meet them. Fighters twisted and burned at 25,000 feet. Parachutes blossomed like dandelions over farmland. Young men died before they learned the names of their bunkmates. The 8th Air Force was bleeding pilots faster than training schools could replace them. Boys who had been flying crop dusters a year earlier were now expected to dogfight veteran. German aces in some of the most unforgiving skies on Earth. The P-51 Mustang was the best fighter America had, but it could not fly itself. In the hands of a novice, it was just an expensive coffin. Debden Airfield sat in the rolling fields of Essex, England, home to the 4th Fighter Group, formerly the Eagle Squadron, a collection of American volunteers who had fought for the RF before Pearl Harbor. These men were not fresh. They had survived the Battle of Britain. They had learned to kill in Spitfires before transitioning to Mustangs. They were hard, seasoned, and skeptical of anyone who had not yet proven himself in combat. The ground crews worked in the cold drizzle, patching holes in aluminum skin, replacing hydraulic lines, scrubbing blood from cockpits. The smell of Agosan cordite hung in the damp air. Engines coughed to life before dawn. Pilots checked their guns, their radios, their oxygen. They did not speak much. There was nothing left to say. Into this world walked 2nd Lieutenant Charles McCorrell, 19 years old, blonde hair, soft features, a face that still carried the roundness of adolescence. He had completed advanced training in California, logged his required hours, and been shipped overseas with a dozen other None of them had ever fired a gun in anger. None had ever seen a German fighter except in grainy film reels. The older pilots glanced at him and looked away. One muttered something about sending children to do men's work. Another suggested he might last a week if he was lucky. The squadron operations officer assigned him to a flight, gave him a brief on radio protocols, and told him to stay close to his leader. McCorrell nodded. He did not argue. He knew what they saw when they looked at him, but he had flown since he was 15. His father owned a small airfield in Pennsylvania. McCorrell had soloed in a Piper Cub before he could legally drive. He understood lift, drag, energy management, and angles. He had spent thousands of hours in the air, most of it alone, learning to read the sky the way some men read books. He was young, he was untested, but he was not incompetent. The mission briefing came at 060 hours. Bomber escort, deep penetration into Germany. Expected heavy resistance. The intelligence officer pointed to a map covered in red circles, each one representing a known Luftwaffe airfield. The bomber stream would pass near 3 of them. The Mustangs would fly top cover, engage any interceptors, and protect the heavies at all costs. McCorrell suited up in silence. Parachute harness, Mae West life vest, leather jacket, gloves. He walked out to his assigned aircraft, a P-51B. With the identification letters Q, the crew chief, a sergeant from Ohio, gave him a quick rundown of the plane's quirks. The throttles stuck a little at high RPM. The radio could be temperamental. The guns were buried at 300 yards. McCorrell listened, nodded, and climbed into the cockpit. The Merlin engine roared to life. 1,200 horsepower, shaking the airframe. He ran through the checklist, tested the controls, checked the fuel mixture. Around him, 30 other Mustangs were doing the same. The noise was deafening. The air shimmered with heat and exhaust. They took off in pairs, lifting into the gray English morning. The formation assembled over the channel, a swarm of silver fighters climbing toward the continent. McCorrell flew on the wing of his flight leader, a captain named Donahue, a veteran with 8 kills. Donahue's voice crackled over the radio. "Stay tight. Watch your 6. Call out any bandits." McCorrell acknowledged. They crossed the coast of France at 18,000 feet. Below, the scarred earth of occupied Europe stretched toward the horizon. The bomber stream was visible ahead, a long trail of B-17s and B-24s glinting in the cold sunlight. The Mustangs spread out, scanning the sky for threats. Somewhere over Belgium, Donaclear's throat, Hugh's engine began to misfire. Smoke trailed from the cowling. He radioed that he was aborting, turning back toward England. He told McCorrell to stay with the group, link up with another flight, but the formation was spread thin. By the time McCorrell tried to join another element, they had already moved ahead. He was alone. If this history matters to you, tap like and subscribe. Flying alone over enemy territory was a violation of every tactical principle drilled into fighter pilots. The Luftwaffe hunted stragglers. German aces worked in pairs, using altitude and surprise to bounce isolated targets. A lone Mustang, no matter how fast, was vulnerable. McCorrell knew this, but turning back meant abandoning the bombers. It meant admitting he could not handle the mission. It meant proving the veterans right. So he stayed. He climbed higher up to 25,000 feet, where the air was thin and the visibility stretched 4 miles. He scanned the horizon in quadrants, the Snort's way his instructors had taught him. Left, right, above, behind. Repeat. The bombers droned on toward their target, a marshalling yard deep in Germany. Flak began to burst around them, black puffs of shrapnel that hung in the air like dirty cotton. The formations tightened, the Mustangs woe above and behind, searching for the inevitable attack. It came from the north, a formation of Focke-Wulf 190s, sleek and deadly, diving out of the sun. Tay came, fast wings sparkling with cannon fire, tearing into the bomber stream. The radio exploded with chatter. Bandits high, bandit 6 o'clock. Break left. 2 more at 3 o'clock. Mustangs peeled off to engage, twisting into the chaos. McCorrell saw them, 9 FW-190s and a loose gaggle, climbing back up after their first pass. They had not seen him. He was above them, positioned perfectly. For a moment, he hesitated. 9-1. Every instinct told him to call for help, to wait for support. But the bombers were still under attack. Men were dying. He rolled, inverted, and dove. The Mustang accelerated 300 miles per hour, 350, 400. The air screamed past the canopy. The 190s grew larger in his gun sight. He picked the trailing aircraft, centered the pipper, and squeezed the trigger. The 450 caliber machine guns hammered. Tracers arced through the sky. The first burst missed. He adjusted. Fired again. This time the rounds walked up the fuselage of the 190. Pieces flew off. Smoke poured from the engine. The German fighter rolled over and fell away. The others scattered. They had not expected an attack from above. McCorrell kept his speed, slashing through the formation, firing at another 190 as it broke right. He saw strikes on the wing route, but the German kept flying. No time to confirm. Apo, the hard blood draining from his head, vision narrowing. The G-forces crushed him into the seat. Now they knew he was there. The 190s regrouped, turning toward him. He was no longer the hunter. He counted them. 8 left. They came at him from multiple angles, trying to box him in. He shoved the throttle forward, diving again, using the Mustang's speed to extend away. The 190s were faster in a dive, but the P-51 could outturn them at high speed. He knew this from the manual. Now he had to prove it. One of the Germans closed in, firing, cannon shells streepy. He broke, left hard, hauling the stick into his lap. The Mustang shuddered on the edge of a stall. The 190 overshot and able to match the turn. McCorrell reversed, rolling right, pulling lead. Feeder. The burst hit the cockpit. The 190 nose down, trailing fire, 2 down. But the others were converging. He could not fight them all. He climbed using the Mustang's superior power at altitude. The 190s followed, but they were slower in the climb. He gained separation, leveled off, checked his fuel. He had burned a third of his load in the dive and the dogfight, enough to get home if he left now. Look down. The bombers were still there, still under attack. The other Mustangs were engaged, scattered across miles of sky. There was no one else to cover this sector. McCorrell turned back. Terward, the Luftwaffe pilots were not novices. Many had been fighting since 1940, surviving the Battle of Britain, the Eastern Front, the Mediterranean. They knew how to kill. They had shot down Spitfires, Hurricanes, P-47s. They flew some of the best piston engine fighters ever built. The Focke-Wulf 190 was fast, rugged, and heavily armed. In the hands of an experienced pilot, Ida was lethal. But experience alone does not guarantee victory. War is not a fair equation. It is a test of adaptability, of split-second decisions, of who can think faster when everything is chaos. The German pilots expected the young American to run. They expected him to panic, to make a mistake. They had seen it before. Green pilots dove for the deck or climbed too steeply and stalled or froze and died without firing a shot. McCorrell did none of those things. He came back at them from a different angle, using the sun to mask his approach. The 190s were climbing, trying to regain altitude advantage. He caught them in a vulnerable position. Noses high, speed low. He fired on the lead aircraft, a long burst that shattered the canopy and killed the pilot. The 190 tumbled, spinning toward the earth. 3 down. The others broke formation, each pilot fighting individually now. One came at him hidden, a classic Luftwaffe tactic meant to test the nerve of the enemy. Both fighters closed at a combined speed of over 600 miles per hour. McCorrell held the trigger down, watching the 190 grow in his wind. Tracer fire from both aircraft crossed in the space between them. Neither pilot flinched. At the last instant, the German broke left. McCorrell broke right. They flashed past each other, wingtips separated by less than 20 feet. He pulled around, looking for the next threat. A 190 was on his tail, closing fast. He pulled into a climbing spiral, forcing the German to follow. The Mustang's Merlin engine gave him an edge at altitude. The 190 struggled to keep up, losing speed, losing position. McCorrell rolled over the top, reversing the spiral, and came down on the German's tail. He fired. The 190's right wing disintegrated. The fighter rolled inverted and dove into the clouds. 4 down, but the others were learning. They stopped trying to dogfight him and started using hit-and-run tactics. One would dive in, fire a burst, and zoom away before McCorrell could respond.